The last bus. The last bus home was always eerie. It was a late-night service that ran through empty streets and past darkened houses. For those who had missed their earlier ride, it was the only way home. Sarah was no stranger to the unsettling atmosphere of the final bus. On this particular night, she was the only passenger as the bus pulled away from the terminal. She sat alone in the back, clutching her bag tightly, trying to ignore the creaks and groans of the old vehicle. As the bus trundled through the deserted city, Sarah noticed something odd. The driver's reflection in the rearview mirror wasn't quite right. It seemed to flicker, like an old film reel. She blinked, and the reflection was normal again. She shook her head, blaming exhaustion. A few stops later, a man in a long coat and fedora boarded the bus. He sat down in the seat directly across from Sarah, his face hidden in shadow. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Sarah tried to focus on her phone, but a sense of dread washed over her. The bus stopped at an intersection, and Sarah glanced at the man. His head was lowered, but something about his posture made her uneasy. When the bus resumed, she noticed that the man's face was now visible. His eyes were hollow, dark voids, and his skin had a sickly, grayish tint. Sarah's heart raced as the bus continued its route. She debated getting off early, but the next stop was still far away. She noticed that the man's eyes were fixed on her, unblinking. She turned away, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. The bus rolled on, and Sarah's unease grew as the surroundings became increasingly unfamiliar. The streetlights flickered, and the buildings seemed to melt into darkness. She glanced at the driver, hoping for reassurance, but his reflection in the mirror was once again flickering. Suddenly, the bus jolted to a stop. Sarah looked out the window. There was no stop sign or platform, just a desolate, fog-shrouded street. The man in the fedora stood up, his movements unnaturally smooth, and walked towards the door. As he passed Sarah, she could feel an icy chill. He leaned in close, his voice a rasping whisper. "You're not going home tonight." The door creaked open, and the man stepped out into the fog. Sarah looked at the driver, desperate for answers, but he was now completely turned around, facing the empty seat behind him. The door closed, and the bus started moving again, but the atmosphere had changed. The fog outside seemed to press in on the windows, and the bus felt colder. Sarah's mind raced. She needed to get off, but the next stop seemed to be an eternity away. Hours passed in a disorienting blur. The bus continued to drive through the fog, and Sarah's fear grew with every mile. Finally, the bus slowed and stopped. Sarah hesitated, then mustered the courage to look out the window. She was staring at her own house. Confused and trembling, Sarah got off the bus. It was early morning now, and the neighborhood was bathed in the soft light of dawn. She turned to thank the driver, but the bus was already pulling away, and the driver's seat was empty. Sarah staggered to her front door, only to find that it wouldn't open. The door was locked, and she had no key. As she pounded on the door, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The message read, "Welcome home." Sarah's heart sank as she realized she was locked out of her house, and the bus had vanished into the morning fog. She turned around, hoping to find someone who could help, but the street was empty, and the chilling fog began to roll in again.